glad to be here. I think this is like my 6th year talking and doing different things almost every year. So we don't have a lot of time, so I thought I would start by just introducing you a little bit to what Matter is, especially what our mission is, which is the most important thing when you're building something, right? And I think it actually relates to maybe many of the reasons why a lot of you might have taken this class. So I'm going to talk about why we do what we do at Matter, and then I'll open up for questions and have a little bit more of a dialogue. I won't try to cover it all in the presentation. Sound good? Awesome, cool. So why do we do what we do? If you're in this class, I think you understand that stories define us. Stories are really important. They're the way that we take complex information and make it into simple, sticky stories that enable us to inform ourselves as a society, that enables us to, they're the ways that we pass on values, to our kids, right? So stories are really important. They define us. And being here at Stanford, you all know that technology empowers us. Technology is empowering us to tell stories in new ways, to organize ourselves in ways that are literally changing the world. And the fact of the matter is, technology also disrupts. Technology is and has been disrupting the storytelling institutions that we rely upon. And the question really has been, what are you going to do about that? What do you do about that fact? Well, I'm a really big believer in something that Clay Shirky wrote. I believe it was in about 2007 when the bottom was falling out of the newspaper industry. He said, if the old model is broken, what will work in its place? The answer is nothing will work, but everything might. Now is the time for lots and lots of experiments. And as you all know, all good entrepreneurs know, everything big started small. Everything big started small. The New York Times didn't just fall out of the sky and just be, right? Everything big started small. Depending on whose story you believe, this is the first sketch of what would become Twitter. Something that has really changed the world. And it started with this sketch. The little small experiment in when a team was trying to solve a problem in what space? Podcasting, right? Twitter came out of an experiment trying to get into the podcasting business of all things. We believe entrepreneurs are the ones who are going to create the future of storytelling. Entrepreneurs like the Kickstarter team, who launched in 2009 and has collected and distributed more money for creative projects, including storytelling and journalism projects, than the National Endowment for the Arts. Everything big starts small. So tomorrow's meaningful media institutions are going to be built by some of you. Entrepreneurs starting with lots of small experiments who you're not sure whether they're going to succeed or fail, but you're trying. So when we started Matter, we started it by saying, what if you tried to build the next great meaningful media institution from scratch? So instead of saying, you can innovate within media by starting something underneath a particular institution, but rather, what if you said, let's build a place that is all about the entrepreneur and allows the entrepreneur to start from a disruptive perspective. Not saying, how do we save X institution, but how do we pursue this vision we have for creating something that may lead to a more informed, a more connected, and a more empowered society. What if you could combine the values of public media and journalism with the mindsets and methodologies of Silicon Valley entrepreneurship and design thinking, which I'm sure you all know a lot about? What if your mission was to educate, to inform, and inspire, as well as to connect and empower in new ways? But the way that you approached that was through a human-centered, prototype-driven process that believed in radical collaboration, sought scalable, viable business models, and leveraged cutting-edge technology to meet users where they're at. And most importantly, above all else, what if you could build a place that had a culture that supported that type of experimentation? Because culture is basically everything. That's what, if you haven't figured it out yet, that's what makes Silicon Valley tick. That's what we're doing at Magic. That's our vision. And the way that we implement it, our mission is we support entrepreneurs building scalable media ventures that create a more informed, a more connected, and a more empowered society. And the way that we do that is by investing in companies. So not supporting them through grants, but investing them and supporting them through what is a 5-month intensive accelerator based on human-centered prototype-driven design. And we do that down in San Francisco. If you know where the South Park area is, we're right like around the corner from where Cafe Centro is. So we are a little over a year old, maybe 15 months old. We take 6 or 7 companies at a time. We get applications from all over the world. If they're not from here and they're excited, they have to move here for the experience, and support them through this 5-month program. So we're on the verge of letting in our 3rd class, and things are going pretty well. So I can talk about all the details, any details that you're interested in, but let me pause right there and open it up to any questions, or maybe if you want to direct my thinking at all. Yes?
How do you feel about founders, co-founders being non-technical? How many technical founders do you expect, and how many non-technical people will you invest in?
Yeah, so it's rare that we would invest in a team that doesn't have technical talent on the founding team. It really depends on the particular company, right? We look for, typically it's teams of 2 or 3 founders. We look for a combination of skill sets across business, technology, design/customer, and storytelling. In our application process, we're really evaluating the team based on 1, kind of their vision, does it fit with our mission? 2, does this team have the skill sets to build what they want to build? So you see a lot of teams who say, we want to do this, but we still have to hire a technical person, and we can't, it's clear they won't be able to execute, and it'll be more about hiring throughout the program. We have to pass on them until we bring them in. If they don't have the core skill set to build quickly on their team. And the most important thing we look for after that is actually the mindsets of how they're approaching their business. We don't see it as this is kind of the final stage of the idea. It's more, can the entrepreneurs navigate what I call the drunken walk of entrepreneurship successfully through the process? Yeah, in the back.
Just wondering if you can go a little bit more into the premise that technology can disrupt.
Can you narrow that question maybe a little bit more?
I felt like you mentioned it, but then kind of quickly moved on. I was just wondering what exactly your thought is on that.
It's almost self-evident, I think, that, technology, just look at how, just go back into when the internet came on board and how that's been affecting the business model for newspapers. That is just a clear example of technology disrupting, right? And technology has just affected how we consume our media, etc. So that the problem that you see is that, not a problem, it's an opportunity, quite frankly, but technology is accelerating how society makes media, how it consumes media, etc., in a way where very static, slow-moving institutions are having a really hard time catching up with their business model, as well as with just being desirable at the end of the day. Yeah.
I'm interested in your use of the word intensive when you say support. Because I've seen a bunch of incubators that give people the space to work, give them the creative freedom. So when you say intensive, what does that mean?
So it means high touch. It means so we're not space is an important component of what we do, but I think accelerators run the gamut, right? I wouldn't lump any of them into the same category, and we don't think about a lot of other accelerators when we do what we do. It's not born out of trying to copy an accelerator. So intensive means, I mean, like I'm in there bleeding with the teams. That's what I mean. It's their startup, and I would never tell them what to do, but I'm there available coaching them, and we've got 128 mentors who are bringing in as well to coach them. They have to be there in San Francisco because the true acceleration of what we do is the culture and the community and the intensive feedback, rapid feedback loops that we do, rather than just sitting, build your thing and we won't touch you along the way.
What is the typical financial structure of this seed round that you're investing in the startups? How does that work?
So we basically do a similar deal to other accelerators out there, which basically nets out to about 5 to 7% common stock equity stake in our companies. So a typical deal would be $50K of cash, but nobody's doing this for the cash. Like you should never do an accelerator for the cash, for basically the entire package. Make sense?
Yeah, I don't know if that makes sense.
Was that what you were asking? Or?
Yeah, I was just curious because I hear that a lot from incubators, like we give them a seed round and like I'm just curious.
It's not a seed round.
Okay.
So I would classify it as a pre-seed round if you would classify it as a round. It's not really a round.
Okay, and have you guys had an experience yet where one of the companies you've incubated or prodded along has actually, looked at a potential acquisition or partnership where there would then be a return for you guys?
An exit for us?
Yeah.
We haven't had any exits yet. We're a year old, so that's a good thing actually, because you're betting on entrepreneurs that are going 5 to 7 years. It's a long game. We've had 2 of our 6 companies from the first class did receive acquisition offers, but decided to pass on them because that's not what they're all about.
Can you just tell them a little bit about the companies that have been in the first and second classes? Because you recently had a demo day, I think it was 7.
Yeah, we had 6 in the first class, 7 in the second.
Really interesting companies. Just tell them a little bit.
How do you? Yeah, I could spend the whole time talking about them. So.
Just give them the headlines.
There you go. So this is our first class. This is our second class. First class spanned watching, listening, reading, and creating interactive experiences in new ways. It spanned both mobile as well as basically building your own platform versus B2B. So I'll just take some examples here. So Spoken Layer, team out of New York. So Spoken Layer, really interesting founder who grew up, he's dyslexic. So the way he learned was growing up, his dad, who's a TV producer and on the road a lot, would read the newspaper and read articles from like Town Magazine or The New Yorker, read it into an audio cassette, send it back to him, and he would listen and learn. And that's kind of the spark of this idea came for him. And he basically had a vision for building a spoken layer of audio across the web to be able to unlock text that is basically great content that is trapped in text, that is not available in audio form for you to take with you somewhere else. So, Spoken Layer basically it's B2B, and they do deals with magazines, other types of kind of like medium form content. A journalist posts their story. Within 20 minutes, the Spoken Layer system has farmed it out to high quality human narrators who then deliver it back and enable somebody like the New Republic or Time or Fast Company to allow their listeners to listen to it and potentially build like experience in the car, etc. Interesting. Channel meter?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, do you know them?
No, but I'm intrigued by the name.
Yeah, so Channel Meter, it's another B2B company, so it's online video analytics for producers of online video, creators and distributors of online video. So they're interesting. So they took an approach to building their company, which I think is a really interesting approach, which is, so they actually worked with the team at Red Bull. So Red Bull, not saying they're changing media for good at all, but they've been doing really interesting stuff in terms of like defining the future of online media.
Short form
Content, short form, long form, people jumping out of the sky, that sort of stuff. And so they actually worked side by side with the team to basically take their analytics and make actionable insights out of that. And so that looked like them sitting with them and almost consulting at first, but with a vision to building a scalable product that then can be used by other media companies. So taking the insights of what I would call an extreme user working on the edge of an industry, building a scalable media product that then others can use. Yes?
Has anyone on your staff ever been so passionate in one of the projects they leave your organization? Like, is there like contracts that you negotiate so that you don't have that drain?
Well, my staff is me and one other person, so it hasn't been a problem yet. But I'm not too worried about that. If that's, I mean, people should follow their passions, so it should definitely. Yeah.
How do you think your funding as a company going? Because if a lot of these media companies are gonna succeed in like 7 years or so, how do you keep funding for Matter going?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So a fund has a very different business model than a regular company. It's based on raising money and then basically getting a return on that money. But that return is like 5-7 years down the road, and we start with like super early stage companies. So I'm actually in the middle of raising our second fund right now, and basically the theory behind Matter was let's not go out and raise a huge fund at first based around concept. Let's get enough money for a proof of concept. I mean, I should do what I would tell my entrepreneurs to do, like start with some little bets, right? So we raised $2.5 million for 2 years and ramp up in 3 class cycles in order to go from me sitting here with a vision to actually having proof points and having people really experience what this is about. And so we're actually, 2/3 of the way or more through that, and I'm actually raising our second fund. And it basically just depends on raising that second fund, right? But what has actually surprised me, sometimes you just gotta go do it, right? What has surprised me, I knew that we would make an impact within the media ecosystem. I did not know that we would make a global impact amongst the global media ecosystem. And we've become this place that I've got executives from around the world who are on their Silicon Valley tour knocking on our door all the time. And now they basically want to participate in our fund going forward. So wish me luck in closing that. Yeah.
So I know, today we talked a lot about like the different technologies and innovations that are occurring in like the digital media space. So like from your experience with these different companies, where do you see the technology intersecting with digital media and journalism, like 5 years down the road? Where do you foresee kind of like the...
Like what's the future look like in 5
like,
years?
Yeah, from your perspective.
No idea. My job, I mean, I don't have no idea. I could have some hypotheses, but I actually think, I get asked that question a lot, like, okay, so you run this thing, like what's the future? And I'm a real big believer that the future is invented by people, and so our job is to create a place that attracts great people doing stuff we couldn't predict and supporting them. And the ones that were like, it's not going to work and it looks like this are the ones that are actually going to be successful. So that's kind of what I think. Give some love to this side of the room.
Oh, thank you. So now, having been through 3 cycles of this,
2 so far.
2. Okay, great. Has the process of how you evaluate potential candidates changed, or what have you learned through that process?
Yeah, it does. constantly. So I'm a big believer it matters a prototype, and it always will be. At best, we got it 80% right, and so always adjust. You know, the whole pattern recognition thing, right? You just develop that more over time. You move a lot of stuff up earlier in the process, like the stuff that bites us later on. We're like, oh, let's make sure that we like integrate that. The thing that I've actually been really, and this might be really good for people to hear, the thing that I've been most surprised by was how much value we can just add in the application process when we're evaluating just the legal structure and the co-founder like arrangements. There's so many people who've done it in a really not great way, and we make sure that like before we invest, we help them clean it up. That's just a little thing, but I didn't get into this to do that. But that's like one thing that was like surprising. One thing that we do in our application process, which is really really useful in separating kind of out. You know, we've got like a semifinalist round, and then for a finalist round, we make them do what I call a mini project, which is essentially this. Take your idea, break it down. I don't know if you guys are using this at all, but break your idea down into desirability, feasibility, and viability. Just tell us what your key assumptions are, and now, in less than 8 hours, go track down at least 3 people to test each of those on. Tell us the insights that you learned and what you're going to do about it next week. It's amazing those who can like step into that and those who are paralyzed by that. And that's one way that we test whether they can survive that drunken walk with the entrepreneur that we're talking about. Yeah.
So if you and what's your co-founder's name?
Jake.
If you and Jake were to come up with some type of transformative idea that builds upon an existing idea or company, like who owns the ideas at that point? How are you sorting out IP as the company evolves?
They own the IP to their companies, I think, and I mean honestly, we're just not. So I have one rule, and I think it's a good rule everybody should hear. It's a no stealth mode rule. Everybody know what stealth mode is?
Yeah.
Is anybody operating in stealth mode right now? Raise your hand. You operating in stealth mode?
Disclose their ideas.
Yeah. So there's nothing that kills entrepreneurs more unless you've got some like technology developed in some lab here that nobody knows about, and it's just like, unless you've got that, the chance that something's going to kill your company because somebody's going to see it, copy it, and execute on it is like 0.5%. The chance that your company is going to fail because you keep it this like idea that's actually probably pretty crappy, like hidden and not like validating it is like 99.5% chance. So everybody who comes in, like we share, it's a collaborative environment. Everybody shares everything, and if you're not down for that, you don't come in. And so we punt that down the road, quite frankly. Yeah.
Which of your companies in your first or second class do you think has the best chance of reaching $1 billion evaluation, and why?
I'm not going to answer that question because they're all my babies. But thank you. You have a lot of questions. I want to say one thing. What's everybody's backgrounds here? So who's got more of like a businessy background? Raise your hand. Who's got more of like a technology background? Who's got more of like a designery background? Who's got more of like a storytelling background? Sweet. Who didn't raise their hand at all? Okay, I'm glad so many people raised your hand for storytelling. So as you know from my brief bio, I was like a documentary filmmaker back in the day. I was like embarrassed to apply to Stanford Business School as a documentary filmmaker. I thought like they would not let me in. I don't know, I'm not a banker, I'm not a consultant, blah, 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 blah. I never would have predicted that I would be in venture capital and in entrepreneurship. And the thing that I also would never predict is that storytelling is the most important skill, period, for entrepreneurship and for something like VC. The most important skill. A character-driven narrative. Everybody heard that term? If you haven't, go look it up. It's super important. You can picture venture as a character-driven narrative. very, very, very well. Use that. Tell a story. Tell a story about your user in context. You know, your solution resolves that. I think a great pitch has 2 arcs of character-driven narratives, 3 acts. Kind of the first 2 acts is really the arc of your user. The second and third act is your team and where you're going. So when you pitch, really suggest starting with what I call a bottom-up point of view. So very specifically, who's your user, what context are they in, what problem are they solving? But then you can't just play in the bottom-up, right? What else do you have to do? You need top-down. So great entrepreneurs jump between bottom-up and top-down. So why is this a big thing? Like zoom out, right? Tell that story, ground somebody in a solid place so they're not wandering, and then zoom out to why this is a big opportunity, to what bet are you making on the world 2 years out that you're aiming for? What are like the 3 trends that are colliding that you're aiming for, right? And why is this big? But don't start there. The worst pitches in the world are like these big, high-level, abstract things. And if you want to know how to pitch well, just come sit with me one day with like pitch after pitch after pitch, and you will really understand why telling a story is really, really important. You have to enable somebody to walk out and be able to tell it to somebody else, right? And so stories, they define us. They're the way that we pass things on. So top down and bottom up. Think about both of those and really utilize your storytelling skills. Think about your characters. And the other thing is pitches aren't just pitches. Like, pitches aren't pitch practice. Pitches are ways that you can internalize your strategy, right? And like, what is it that you're doing? I know you all don't really know what you're doing right now, I'm sure, on your projects, right? But pitching gets you, is a way to clarify and take all these multivariate, problem, it's a multivariate problem trying to solve a startup. And pitching that in a story is helpful for you, it's helpful for your team, and it's helpful for investors. So I just wanted to underline that. Probably have room for 2 more questions. Sorry that it's so quick. All right, put your hand down if you haven't already asked a question. Go.
So you spoke about experimenting. How do you qualify an experiment as a failure and move on to the next experiment, given that there's a possibility that you can change one tiny bit of it and then still succeed? At what point in time do you tell your entrepreneurs this is not working, time for you to pivot?
I never tell my entrepreneurs that. It's up to them to decide for themselves whether they pivot or persevere, right? Entrepreneurship is all about failing forward. So there's no algorithm to precisely say this or that, right? But hopefully you're positioning yourself in a space where top-down, your like top-down hypothesis of the world and like why you're doing this here in the first place will hold true through many different iterations and instantiations of what you might build, right? So if you know you're playing in this like certain playing field and it makes sense to spend your time there, and your first bet like isn't working for some reason, you can failing forward means building off of the insights that you have learned and then adjusting to something else, right? And there's a hierarchy of ways of thinking about what works and what doesn't, and I always start with just kind of the basic user need. At the end of the day, if there's no desirability there, then it's not going to work anyway. But it's really case by case. There's no like magic bullet there. Yes.
So you see tons of ideas all day. You think about this for your life. What are like your top 2 ideas that you would like to see be made that aren't existing right now?
I'm drowning in ideas right now. That's a good question. I don't know. I think there's an opportunity, and I don't know what it is, right? But, okay, 2 ideas that I'd like to see. One very specific and one just general. I think there's a big opportunity in focus, a more focused experience, like getting away from constantly tapping this thing, right? I know I need it, so build something for that, where I can turn this thing off. The second, actually very clearly, something that I would have liked to see, and haven't seen yet in applications coming in. We have a lot of roots in kind of public media, and I would love to see something that takes a totally new way, like taking, pledge drives, right? Like, public media actually has a really interesting business model. 10% of listeners convert to paying customers, basically making donations, right? I think, like the New York Times paywall, I think it's less than like 0.5%. So it's an interesting business model there. But the way that they do that is something that was created in basically like the 70s and early 80s and hasn't changed. And so I think there's a big opportunity there. And I'm in a position where like the right team and idea who had passion for that came along, I can connect them to the whole ecosystem of the entire like public media ecosystem and like take care of that distribution. So still haven't seen it yet, but I would really like to see that. Those aren't like huge ideas. Again, my job is to build the place, and I hope most of the ideas that come in are ones that I haven't even thought of before. The whole world is much smarter than I am. I'm dumb. One more.
Is that okay, guys? Okay. So there's a lot of VCs, one being Bootstrap, that likes to invest in solely Bitcoin companies. They're trying to.
Are you talking about Boost? Is that what you said?
Bootstrap. Did I stop saying that?
Boost Step?
Boost up.
Boost Up. Sorry.
Yeah, Boost up.
I was thinking about a dance like dubstep. Yeah.
So they're trying to do just solely Bitcoin, thinking that's going to be like the next big thing. But
Yeah.
I wasn't sure if that was like the right way to invest in companies. Do you plan on constantly diversifying your portfolio companies?
So our mission is focused around media. We're a vertical accelerator, so it's really important that we stay within that boundary, although it's media really loosely defined. So I'm a big believer that it's about the verbs, not the nouns, right? I don't like to use the word like journalism and newspaper and all that type of stuff. It grounds us in the past. I like to talk about to inform, to connect, to empower. And media, I have a love-hate relationship with because it's kind of like a noun, but so we do gut checks on teams that come in, right? I like written boundary cases. Now, in terms of them or others, it's important to have, most investors have hypotheses that they're betting on, like the world is going in this direction, and so we believe Bitcoin is big, so we're gonna fund that next thing, right? We're just a believer that like the future of media is up for grabs, and that entrepreneurs are the ones who are gonna define it.